we also, thank you. So Cheryl, Gianna, Betsy, and is anyone
Felicia.
else on the, oh, Felicia, but Felicia will not be speaking this evening.
And
Our
June.
leader was June Cooper. So the Reverend June Cooper is here, and she's going to set a little bit of context. So we're going to be giving you a little bit of a report. Again, having just returned back, it isn't fully processed, but we're going to ask her to share a little bit about this journey. Betsy's going to speak about one experience, especially dealing with the Legacy Museum. I'm going to talk about the journey from Selma to Montgomery. We had assigned to you, but not told you, Gianna, that if you might talk about the art that you saw at that was especially good. And Cheryl's going to talk about another site. So that's what our lineup is. We'll just each talk just for a few minutes, and then be able to summarize and be available for your questions. So again, my apology for the switch, but this is what we do as church, right? We support those who are working to minister to family. June, would you lead us in prayer also to begin, June, and then we'll.
Are we ready?
I think we should start.
We can start? Okay. Would you pray with me? Good and gracious God, we breathe in and we take in the world, and we breathe out the breath that you've put in us. We breathe out the exhaustion, perhaps, from the day. So let us just breathe in one more time. Inhale, and let's exhale. O God of breath, God of life, God of all creation, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to just gather around these screens and this technology to be a community where we can learn together and where we can teach one another, but most of all, where you can dwell in our midst. We thank you for those who had a long night and a long day and were safely returned to us, and now we see them. We thank you. So with prayers of thanksgiving, we ask you to be in our midst as we do this work this evening. We thank you for your faithfulness and for the ways that you love us and keep us. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. So I just shared, and I think most of you heard, but in this ongoing series, listening to others humbly. Now you had a chance, we've been hearing various people on Sundays preach, and we've been hearing others speak on Mondays. And because Roshana is not able to be with us today, but will be in 2 weeks, we've asked June to lead us in a bit of reflection about the Montgomery journey. We'll be open for your questions, of course.
Sure. Well, we tried this pilgrimage back in 2021. Joy and other members here were signed up to do the pilgrimage to search for truth and justice in Montgomery and Selma, Alabama. And you know what happened in 2020? Plague came to visit us. So we had to do other things. And so now it was such a delight to be with people from your congregation, Joy, Cheryl, Gianna, Felicia, and Betsy. Betsy, you're there?
I'm here.
You're here. And Tim, as we took this journey over the past 4 days, I was fortunate enough to get onto the 10-10 plane and created a scene because I said, my colleagues are coming. They have to get their bags. I had checked my bags straight through. So my night was one of tossing and turning. And then I heard they had gotten a van and took matters into their own hands. So um, what a group. What a group. So it's so glad to be here. Let me tell you just a little bit about what this pilgrimage entails. And my work has been extensive in justice ministries. I ran City Mission Boston for over 20 years. And then a couple years before I left that organization, I had the privilege of doing my first pilgrimage and meeting a woman named Amelia Boynton Robinson. I think our pilgrims know who she is, and I would imagine some other people here know who she is. Well, she is the woman who's in that iconic picture that was taken on Bloody Sunday in 1965, where she is on the ground. She's been beaten back by the Alabama State Police. And I had an opportunity in 2024 to meet her in a very serendipitous way. I won't get into details, but nevertheless had a chance to meet with her. And she prayed with all 14 of the pilgrims that went that year. And she told me what to do. She said, you continue this work. And so that was in 2014. And here it is, years later, into a new decade where this work has heart and soul and head in it for me. So since that time, I've been working with congregations and with my colleague, Murray Embers, who's resting in peace right now, and of putting together a pilgrimage that is not just it's just not a tour of sites, sacred sites in Selma and Montgomery. This work, this experience is to search for truth and to search for justice. Two things that continue to elude us as people of faith. So in thinking about that and the sacred stories from Montgomery and Selma, it made sense to Murray and I to not just take people to sites and have a quick prayer of thanksgiving and leave. No, that would be too easy. This pilgrimage work that we do is about an inner and outward journey. The outward journey takes us to the sites and many different sites and types of sites, not just the museum sites, but the sites where people are doing the work, continuing to do the work in Montgomery as the continuing legacy of racism continues to impact residents through the disparities that we see along every social indicator that you can think of. So that is the outward journey. The inward journey is as important as getting to sites on time and getting food and getting on buses and figuring ourselves out and calling Ubers. The internal journey really centers around a model that we call wisdom. Emotional wisdom. And we changed the language. We don't talk about it as being emotional intelligence, as some social scientists would talk about it, but we talk about it as emotional wisdom. It's something that we all have. It's something that we all have. And the idea here is that the pilgrimage is designed to open your heart, to compassion, to open your heart to hear hard stories, to open your heart to taking in some of those hard stories and realizing that maybe with a few twists of fate, it could be me. It could be me. And for some of it, it is I. It is I. So that work that we do around emotional wisdom is work that we talk a lot about mindfulness. You might have noticed that in our prayer, I started with breathing, that we carry trauma and our emotions, not just in our mind, but we carry it throughout our whole body. So it's good to be reminded to breathe and to be in a space of mindfulness. When we're in a space of mindfulness, we're able to pause and to take in all that's around us. Oftentimes I say, being present is not having presence. There's a difference. To be present versus having presence, to show up as who God has made you to be. Beautiful, beautiful to behold, but to show up just as you are and let the Spirit have its way, have its way, and take us to new and exciting and places that are even beyond our imagination. So that work is done, that emotional wisdom work, we do that before you go on pilgrimage. So that prepares us for what we're going to experience and for what you're going to hear in a little while. So the pilgrimage has really four meta goals. I mean, three meta goals. One is to understand the living legacy and how the legacy of racism continues to be front and center and to plague our country. It is not something that is just that impacts people of color. It impacts people who are also wrapped in white skin as well. So we learn a little bit about that. And then we talk about learning this history so that we can liberate ourselves. We talk a lot about humanity and human liberation, and we're able to see that and talk about that in doing some mindfulness work, in singing. This group can sing. I won't go in, we won't sing tonight, but maybe when we meet in person, we will sing together. And then the last is to create a sense of community. And I think some of our pilgrims can speak about how meaningful that has been for them. Just those 4 days of being in a real serious, sacred space where we can do the work and we also can laugh and have a little joy. And you cannot help but have joy when you have a minister named Joy. Okay, I'm just saying. Right? Okay. So with that, I want to make sure I leave time for my colleagues to speak. And certainly there will be a question and answer time, and I'd be glad to answer and expound upon anything that you would like to know about. Thank you.
How many of these have you led, June?
I have led about 10 of these. I've worked with people from all various denominations, the Presbyterian ministers from Dallas, Texas. Last year, I had a group from San Francisco, United Church of Christ. Many people come from the Boston area. So it's been a joy to really be able to learn and understand how people process this from different places around our country.
Cheryl, you had brought up a little bit of tape, or that's what they used to call it in the olden days, videos from YouTube. Are there, I don't know if you and June had a chance to discuss what we might want to see now.
We sure didn't, but we could talk about it right this minute, which is that I have an overview of the legacy sites that we could show. And I also have that video from the Cleveland Clinic about empathy. And I have a couple others. So if there's something particular you'd like to talk about, you'd like to showcase.
I think it would be nice to showcase the video from the Equal Justice Initiative. And it might give people a sense of the arc of what we're talking about, from the enslavement of African American people to the continuing legacy of mass incarceration.
Okay. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to first of all put the link to the Equal Justice Initiative in the chat so we can look at that. And I'm going to share my screen to show the video about them.
Okay.
So,
and we're going to split up and talk about different elements of this, but much of what they've done is on website and available to us, but a lot of it is not. And so what I want to say by that is they have been very careful. We do not take photos and we do not video ourselves on our phones, some of what is presented in the museum, because they want to be respectful of both the people who've done the work, but also those who are being portrayed. But it's very, very powerful.
I am one of
Okay,
Is that it?
let's do this.
Okay.
Let's see all the things I have open on my page right now.
That's her beautiful son.
Oh, it was just, just an excuse so I could show him off. How about that? I'll do anything, really. Okay, here we go. That's him. He's so
You're a proud
gorgeous.
mother.
I am a proud mother, and now I need to make this
should be.
bigger. And I'm gonna go here to EGI. Excuse me, I should be better, but I'm tired. So we're gonna
Hey,
we're doing what we're doing
you're
here.
doing the best. You're doing the best you can, and you're doing
Really,
a
I
great
am, and
job.
it's subpar, but we're doing it. Okay, let's get there. Come on, I just had it open.
Is it?
Gonna have to look at my son again for a minute. Oh no. Okay. And where's my video? Nope. 1 second. Sorry for this.
About the legacy slides?
Nope. Big video.
There you go.
There's my cheat sheet right there.
There we go.
One more time.
And then we'll turn to
Okay.
Betsy, who's going to tell us about her experience.
I am one of millions of Black Americans whose foreparents were enslaved in this country. Slavery in America was tragic, violent, horrific. It had lasting consequences on our nation, and we continue to struggle with the legacy of that institution today. At the legacy sites, we explore the legacy of slavery, the terror and violence that followed the Civil War, decades of racial apartheid and segregation, and continuing racial injustice. The Legacy Museum is a place to learn, to understand, to explore things that are not frequently discussed. But more than that, it's a place to be inspired, to be challenged, to understand the continuing struggle that must be advanced if we are to achieve the full promise of America. The National Memorial for Peace and Justice is dedicated to thousands of people who are the victims of racial terror lynchings. Their names, the locations, the spaces are not widely known, and we need to remember to overcome that tragic history. Freedom Monument Sculpture Park confronts the deep and devastating tragedy of slavery and the continuing legacy that haunts our nation even today. All of the legacy sites are designed to lift up our nation, to advance justice, to confront our history, and to get us to a better place. We believe there is something better waiting for us in America. We think there's something that feels more like freedom, more like equality, more like justice. But to get there, we can't ignore the past. We have to confront our history, find our truth, and lift up justice. Please join us at the legacy sites in Montgomery, Alabama.
That, of course, was Brian Stevenson, who wrote the book Just Mercy. He was a few years behind me in law school, and he has spent his entire career working to bring justice for the many people who have been convicted wrongly and often are on death row. That's where he focuses. And he's 1 out of 10 people that we kill on death row is found to have been innocent. So, and exonerated. So that's the work he's done. He's also done groundbreaking work on juvenile justice, and the law in the United States changed because of the cases he brought. So a juvenile cannot be put to death for an act that took place while they were a juvenile. They can have life in prison, but they cannot. So the 3 sites that were mentioned that are part of his operation and what he has created with the Equal Justice Initiative. Our first, the Legacy Museum that Betsy will talk about, the memorial, which is to all the people who were lynched, over 4,000 of them. And that's what Mass Design, including Faith's son, worked on, and Jadi and Mazi, from whom you've heard before, creating that. That's what made us reach out to them. And then the third piece is a new sculpture park that just opened a year ago, and Gianna's going to talk about that. So thank you, Cheryl, for that introduction. Betsy, do you want to speak about the museum?
I'll start. But I want to say first that we were blessed to have June as a leader, and it certainly was an inward journey as well as a lot of travel and a lot of learning in many, many ways. The museum is unlike any other museum experience I've ever had. And there's so much I could say about it. It's brilliant, it's imaginative, it's incredibly effective in what it teaches you. But I'll just talk about the first part of it. I had the good luck to go twice, which I was grateful for because I was overwhelmed the first time. But because I stayed over an extra night, I had a chance to go yesterday afternoon and look at some things that I just had been unable to absorb the night before. If you tried to do everything, you'd be there for days. But the first thing that happens is you go in and there's this huge wall, and what it is waves, huge waves coming at you, breaking at you, these huge, the sea rolling in. And just looking at that, you get a visceral experience of the transatlantic voyage. And you know that most of the enslaved people were down in the holds of the ship in miserable, crowded, dark, filthy conditions. And then you go into the next room, there's a little background on the history of the slave trade. And the next place you go is a gallery of heads rising out of the water, and every face is different, but they're all suffering. And, they're women, they're children, and it's just incredibly moving. The next step after that, there's some discussion of slave pens and how they were kept while they were waiting to be sold. And then there's a gallery where there's a series of cages, essentially. And inside the cages are holographs, is that what they're called? But anyway, it's like talking to a person. You stand in the right place and the figure coalesces enough to speak to you. And that, you can't do all of them, but the ones that you do are heartbreaking. And the most heartbreaking of all is one where there's a little boy and a little girl. And the boy just says, "Mama. Mama." A little bit later, "Have you seen our mother?" And at that point, I was so overwhelmed, I asked about leaving the museum. There was a guard near there. I thought maybe I needed a break. Turned out I hadn't gone very far, and what I did instead was just sit quietly. There was a place where a woman was singing a spiritual, again, a hologram. And that sort of helped me restore. I mean, for me to be overwhelmed just by going through that, it doesn't hold anything to the experience that real people went through centuries ago. But the other brilliant thing about the museum is how it tells the story of the through line. I mean, you can only treat people the way the slaves were treated if you make up this story that they are inferior or not really human. And that core lie persists. Slavery ends, but then you get the rage of terrorism and the lynchings, and that's horrific in a different way. And then as you go on, what you get in our modern day is mass incarceration. And the clarity of that connection had not been clear to me until going through this museum. So that was sort of the first piece. And in the meantime, there's so much to think about. You learn so much. They do it in such a variety of ways. In the slavery section, for example, there's a wall of quotations advertising slaves for sale, and then there's another wall that's all quotations about enslaved people trying to find their relatives who'd been sold away from them. It's incredibly, it just makes such an impact that even just remembering it is hard. So that's for the museum, but I want to say, in case I don't get a chance later, one of the things that really hit home was meeting people of such deep faith. And some of them I met, through the history, because we heard Dr. King a lot, and we heard a lot about Rosa Parks, for example, and just the ordinary people who took part in the boycott and the Selma March. But we also had people in our group who were guided by faith. And Joy did a wonderful job of introducing us to quite a few other people in the community. And again, to realize just to be with people who've been called to do important things because of their faith was profound. So thank you.
Joy, you're muted.
Just giving you a little taste and a piece of this. Gianna, would you be willing to share with us what the sculpture park was like in your particular experience?
Absolutely. So we went to the sculpture park, which is another legacy site that was recently open, I believe about a year ago. And it's on the Alabama River, so you can choose to take a boat ride to get to the park, which I'm really happy that we did, because it sort of orients yourself into the area and the landscape where the sculpture park is located. And it's a very purposeful location because after the transatlantic slave trade was deemed illegal, the domestic slave trade, of course, took that big place in transporting enslaved people all throughout the southern states when there was a really increased desire for enslaved peoples in the deep south. So many of them were transported through the Alabama River. So that was really profound to go through the boat ride where someone is speaking to you about this history and about the people that were suffering. And you find yourself, or at least I found myself thinking, what must they have been thinking going through this river? If this was their last moment, they would see their loved one, maybe if they were with loved ones at the time. What they were thinking as they were looking at the river through the trees. Some of them drowned in the Alabama River trying to escape what they knew their fate would be. So all of that was incredibly profound. And then you reach the sculpture park, and there's many signs describing the history of enslavement, specifically the treatment of indigenous peoples and how they were enslaved at the beginning of the park as well, which I thought was really profound. And you go through all of these markers as well as beautiful artwork done by indigenous peoples, people of color, and it really embodies the experience that many of them had. So I thought the artwork was beautiful. The part that spoke mostly to me was the fact that you could see the Alabama River as you were going across the landscape and you can hear nature and how peaceful it is. But there's something really deep and profound about seeing how peaceful the nature was, but knowing the horrible tragedies that people were going through in that landscape was really moving. And throughout, they had narratives from enslaved peoples in many of their memoirs and what their experience were like. And it tied together the park because you would read part one, part two, part three, part four, and then finish with part five at the end. And some people were able to make it out of enslavement and escape, but you were able to see their story and how it changed, and how there were setbacks to that as well. You were able to go into a replica of a railroad car where many enslaved people were trafficked. And that was a really profound experience. You were able to see a video about those rail cars and imagine how tightly packed they were and the experiences many people had on that. And then the part that really moved me was there are these recreations of slave cabins. There was one recreation and then there were two others. And I walked in and I really felt it felt heavy. It felt really heavy in there. And I couldn't really place it, but I was looking around, I was looking through the cracks that some of the wooden panels had. And I was wondering, did people look through these cracks wondering, sorry, it was really moving. Um, will I be able to escape? Uh, really, really moving. But I was able to ask the woman who was standing there if those were real. And she said they were. So that kind of placed everything in perspective for me. And then moving out of the park, they finished off with this list of names on this wall of all of the last names of enslaved peoples and descendants and accounted for over 10 million. So the whole thing was really impactful. And I think the park was a great way to cap off the Legacy Museum and the experience we had there, but in seeing both artwork that really captured the beauty that many people were able to take from that afterwards, generations afterwards, but also capture the profound tragedy of enslavement. So that was my experience. I'm sorry I was moved.
We're glad that you were willing to share that with us, Gianna. As you all know, Gianna is director of our history program and has been doing a wonderful job leading us along with Cheryl. And we are about to ourselves have artwork because there's so much that, you know, words alone cannot say, but that our art will be showing us. So thank you, Gianna, very much. And the structure she was talking about were in that first video that we saw where Brian Stevenson was standing. And there pieces of newspaper stapled all over them, just little bits that have been ripped off because that was the only way to stay warm. People would tape up newspapers inside their the shack. I want to also, so I thank Gianna and Betsy so much. We went to another, we were led by June to another site that Cheryl's going to tell you about that was different. Can you talk about that, Cheryl?
Yes, and it was different. One thing I spent a lot of time thinking about, and have been thinking about is there's so many ways to tell a story. This winter, as we've been reconsidering how we tell the story of King's Chapel history, you know, there's a lot of different angles on it, right? I mean, it's a long history. And how do you tell that to a stranger who's just popped by, who's just walking by? And when we were in Montgomery, the Equal Justice Initiative sites, the legacy sites, were so beautiful and so moving and so perfectly done. And then we went to a couple other sites, one of which was the Mothers of Gynecology exhibit. By contrast, it was not staffed by people in the same uniform, and it was not pristine, and it was not careful. It was a little messy. It was outside. It was a garden, and it was in memory of women, the Mothers of Gynecology, who were women who were experimented on, women of color who were experimented on by the father of gynecology. He did surgery on them and did not use anesthesia, although that was available to him. And it's a heartbreaking story. And then he went to take his knowledge and then operated on white women. And of course, you know, took proper care of them and used anesthesia so they didn't feel pain. What I was struck by at this museum is how kind they were, that they had chairs where you could sit in and you could really feel what was happening, you know, you could feel what these women were experiencing. They encouraged you to smell the herbs around, and it was just a very different experience, and it felt like a necessary counter to the heaviness of the other museums. I'll also note that we went to the Rosa Parks Museum, which was also very different. We got to be in a bus ourselves. We got to watch a reenactment of Rosa Parks' refusal to change her seat. And that was also so beautiful and so moving and a very different experience from the other museums. And I just left the experience, having been to these museums, having sat with the storytellers that June arranged for us, to think that there's just so many ways to tell a story, and maybe you need all of them to really come to terms with the depth of the story. It was really an honor to be there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. The artist who created the artwork there is a woman who's creates fascinating and powerful pieces of contemporary art that we shared. Cheryl, I think you said you had a video that was of the sculpture garden. Is that right? Or
I do. I will share that with you.
I'll come back and show you again some of these of the art place. This is the one that was described to us by Gianna.
Cue that up. One moment.
And Cheryl, do you also have the one you just talked about?
I do. I'll play both of those. First, we'll do the sculpture park. And let's go here. And get to see my son again. There we go. I don't know why that happens. Here we go.
That's okay. This is the women of gynecology. That one Cheryl talked about.
We'll have to go back some 25 years when I first heard about Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. There's this popular painting, call it the Robert Tom painting, but it's a depiction of these three women. They're surrounded by white men and they look like they're enslaved. Started doing some in-depth research on these women. And that's when I found out that J. Marion Sims, he's pretty much known throughout the medical community as the father of gynecology, having touted or claims that he was the one who perfected the Sims retractor and some of the instruments that they were using, the experimentation that he conducted on enslaved women and immigrant women, but primarily enslaved African women and their descendants, is horrifying. Procedures without anesthesia, and then without consent. In Montgomery, Alabama, there is a plaque that says that he's the father of gynecology. And the more I read that, the more I go by that statue. I've always asked the question, well, where are the mothers? Right now, there's a reckoning with the monuments and Civil War and American Revolutionary War heroes, if you will. But no one is talking about these women that were victimized and used as experiments. It's time that we need to have this conversation. The Mothers of Gynecology will be on top of a 2-foot platform engraved with bricks around the base of it. Anarcha looks like a warrior. She's tall, she's about 15 feet tall. Betsy, she's pregnant and she stands about 9 feet tall. And then there's Lucy, that's about 6 feet. And there's an expression on each one of their faces. There's one of pain, one of honor, and one of strength. They're made with discarded items, brass, bronze, all different types of metals, found objects turned into a beautiful piece of art. I give tours in Montgomery, Alabama. Brian and Kristen came for the opening of this amazing museum.
Became really fast friends, immediately connected over the fact that I also had a tour here in San Francisco's Japantown. And then Michelle came out to visit us a couple of times. And I think on the last time that she was here, we were walking around our neighborhood in Hayes Valley.
I turned the corner and I saw this amazing statue done by Dana Albany. I was in awe.
The next week, we were at a dinner. I was sitting across from this woman, and this woman said, "You live in San Francisco, where do you live?" And we said, "We live in Hayes Valley." And she said, "Oh, I worked on Tara." And both of us were just mind blown and said, "We have to connect you with Michelle." And so she ended up connecting Michelle to Dana Albany.
A year later, we are here with this monument. I don't like to say that the stars aligned, but destiny was calling us. And they called us to San Francisco. To come to San Francisco, and especially with this community, I mean, this is where Dana's art kind of unfolds. But to know that this is part of the old, or one of the last Black communities in San Francisco, where, you know, these women are going to be erected, I think is phenomenal. When you talk about displacement, when you talk about being discarded, Black people in San Francisco understand what that means. You know, it just seems like this is the right place to do it. My friends, people who took my tours, found out that I was coming, they started asking for donations. So from there, it just kind of stuck. People were bringing donations, spoons, mufflers, you name it, they brought it. There's 15 artists in there that said, we will volunteer our time. And so that's what's happening. People just want to be a part of something monumental in this respect.
I saw Dana's post about this on Instagram and immediately I wanted to be involved. The fact of the matter that nobody really knows these stories yet, I mean, it's time for people to be educated. I donated a pair of wall sconce candelabras that were from my grandparents' home. I can't wait for people to shout out, oh, look, a candelabra, you know, and I know that that was what I put there, you know. I'm gonna probably like cry when I see them on these women's thighs, you know, these big strong pieces. I feel like this monument is gonna be so magnificent. It's gonna slow people down long enough that they're forced to learn something. And I think that's a great way to teach people.
It's not for my children, it's for my children's children and those that will come long after us. I know that you could not talk about these women without talking about James Marion Sims, but I think he's had his due. I want people to say, no, he was not a man of his time. Surely he knew that what he was doing was wrong because these were human beings. And my end goal is to not only amplify their voices, but to bring some humanity to these women. And when you come to Montgomery, I will tell you about each one of them.
The sculpture park, Cheryl? Do we have the clip of that also? I know our time is short. I can't recall how long that is.
I'm sorry. Remind me what we're doing next.
The sculpture park, we have a little.
Yep. Here we go with that.
Squarespace's creative tools let you design a unique, engaging website.
History books aren't the only way we learn from the past. Contributor Mark Whitaker tells us about a public space transformed to tell the story of slavery.
So you step off this boat and we go now through 400 years of history.
That's right.
In Montgomery, Alabama, wedged between a maze of train tracks and the river, a long neglected plot of land has been transformed.
Our artists have the ability to depict the humanity and the dignity of people, even in the midst of something brutal and violent.
It's now home to the Freedom Monument Sculpture Park, the vision of lawyer and social activist Bryan Stevenson. The 17-acre park, set to open this month, is filled with nearly 50 sculptures by world-famous artists like Kehinde Wiley, Simone Lee, and Kwame Akoto-Banfo.
In this region, cotton plantations were everywhere.
And here you see all the generations.
Yes, exactly.
Collectively evoking the history of slavery in America.
It's a tough subject, it's a challenging subject, and we wanted to use art to help people manage the weight of this history and engage in a more complete way with the lives of enslaved people.
It's the latest project for Stevenson, founder and director of the Equal Justice Initiative, or the EJI, also based in Montgomery. For more than 30 years, Stevenson and his team have provided legal services to people on death row, to date overturning more than 140 convictions and sentences. 10 lashes, 39 lashes. He says, understanding the racial injustices of the present begins by reckoning with the tortured legacy of the past.
As they say, the truth can set us free. And I genuinely believe that there is something that feels more like freedom, more like equality, more like justice waiting for us in America. But I don't think we'll get there if we don't find the courage to talk honestly about our past.
Over the years, the EJI has expanded its mission to building cultural sites in Montgomery, like the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, focusing on America's history of lynching.
There were 10 million people who were enslaved in this country, and much of what I hope we can do is honor those who struggled and suffered, and those who endured and persevered.
That begins by taking park visitors across the Alabama River, a route taken by tens of thousands of enslaved Africans.
You'd see these boats with enslaved people chained in the bottom, docking just up here, just a half mile from here. And then there would be what enslaved people referred to as the weeping time, the time where they had to fear being separated from children, separated from spouses.
The park mixes artifacts of slavery, like these 170-year-old plantation dwellings.
We've documented dwellings where people were living in the same dwellings that their foreparents lived in during enslavement until the 1990s.
And this whipping post.
You begin to see why it is so ominous. Enslaved people would be chained on those hooks on the side and would be standing and then be beaten and lashed.
With powerful works of artistic imagination, such as Strike by artist Hank Willis Thomas.
I love this piece. It's so important. I could have never imagined that there would be a place this meaningful for this work to exist.
Obviously, violence, resistance. What else were you trying to evoke?
I'm also thinking about peace and resolution. In this case, the gesture of just stopping the brutality begins the opportunity for us to find peace.
That theme of resilience continues down the pathway to the park's centerpiece, a 43-foot tall monument filled with names, designed by Stevenson himself.
The names come from the 1870 census. That was the first time that formerly enslaved people could claim a name that would be recognized by the government, that would be recorded for history.
People mostly think that they got all those names from their enslavers, but that's not necessarily true.
No, only about 40% adopted names that were associated with an enslaver to kind of maintain these kinship lines that had been created on plantations, brothers, sisters, cousins. They wanted to stay connected and they needed a name to bring that together.
In total, there are 122,000 surnames, including my own.
I see it. Yes,
There it is. There it is. Whitaker.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Oh my God.
Well, that was speaking to you. Most people don't find it that quickly and that easily.
Wow. It's moving, that.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It really is.
It was one T.
With one T.
Those are my people. We're the one T Whitakers.
On the back, you'll see a 2T or somewhere else.
Then and now, Brian Stevenson says, the towering memorial is also a metaphor for the hope of a better future in the distance.
We will continue to struggle for the freedom that you died for. That's what I think we owe those who suffered before us.
Isn't it great when two good things come together, like the security of dental?
Good. The security of dental implants. That was another thing. No.
So important.
I wanted to just talk a little bit about the day we spent reliving the journey that was taken for voting rights from Selma to Montgomery. And it was at a time when there were, even though the law, of course, allowed people to vote, the rules that had been put in place in terms of poll taxes that could be worth, several years worth of your income that you'd have to pay, or more importantly, the questions, the ridiculous, horrible, detailed questions that people were asked, all as a way of not being able to vote. If you were white, you were grandfathered in. That's where the phrase comes from. If your grandfather had been able to vote during the period after the Civil War, you were not required to take this test. And of course, the only people who had grandfathers who'd been able to vote were white. So the tests were applied only to Blacks. And there was going to be an initial march. John Lewis was part of it. It was over the bridge from Selma, and the idea was to march 54 miles to Montgomery, the state capital, to demand rights. You all know that first day of the march was called Bloody Sunday because there were such vicious beatings that took place as the people walked up and over this little bridge. It's a small bridge that goes over the Alabama River from Selma into down the road that would take you to Montgomery, 50 some miles. But as they rounded the top, they could see all the state troopers there who just beat people back, and in fact didn't stop just by beating them back, but ran them all the way back. And throughout the night, we're searching for people. And there was a church that people had gathered in and ran back to that. But many people, including John Lewis, were very brutally harmed. The question then became, what do you do in light of that? So we learned the details about what took place, the efforts to work with the courts, to work with the federal government, and they agreed that they would have, Dr. King came, and that it had all been publicized, of course, through the TV. Imagine if we didn't have TV. So now TV was there to display this to the nation, and Dr. King called on people, especially clergy, to arrive. And we all know the story of the Wellesley Unitarian minister, Mr. Reeb, who responded. He was there for the second day of the march. And at that point, they did not yet have a permit from the federal court to march. And what was worked out with the federal court, because the knowledge was if you came and there was another huge bloody battle, that would make it harder for this federal judge to give the permit because people could be endangered. So but Dr. King said, I've asked people to come and march. So they agreed that they would come over the crest of the hill and then stop, and not on that second day, it was Tuesday actually, they would not confront all of the people who were there. So it was an interesting, how do you go ahead with your point, but recognize that they were going to stop. So they knelt and prayed. They knelt and prayed and then turned back. This, they did receive later the permit from to march from the federal judge, who was a man of great courage. When he issued these various decisions, no one would sit in the pew with him at church. They would not sit in his pew. He was ostracized. But during the time after Tuesday where they knelt, there was an opportunity as they were trying to negotiate how to enable the march to go forward. Johnson did end up federalizing the state troopers, the National Guard rather. And so all those people who were anti, integrationists, certainly they were strong segregationists by and large. Nevertheless, they were now part of the federal militia, and they obeyed. They obeyed their officers. And they protected the Blacks. But there were opportunities to get that in place. And the other thing that they were able to get in place was for these many thousands of people who had now come, how are they going to make it? 50 miles, you can't do that in a day. And so they ended up reaching out to people, where can we stop along the way? And they set up huge communities. Everyone came together as they had in the bus boycott to create wonderful structures and strategies so that they could have carpools and figure out how to continue to boycott the buses in Montgomery. In a similar way with this March for Voting Rights, afterwards, they would ask people along the route, can we stay on your land? Most people would not allow them to. But the very first place they stayed, there was a white man who had farmland named David Hall. It was called Campsite Number 1. People came in and provided food, helped set up places for people to stay in tents, helped set up, sanitary facilities. And David Hall said, you may use my farm. Afterwards, bankers would no longer lend to him, the white bankers. And so he lost his farm. He still had the land, but he lost his farm. So day one and ramification number 1. The second day, the group marched and continued to march along. And the second campsite was a site owned by a Black woman who had a small store. And they stayed there for the night. The marchers were protected, but the woman thereafter wholesalers would not sell to her anymore of the items that she sold to the Black community. So the second campsite and ramification number 2. The third site was a campsite was a man named Robert Gardner who enabled them to again stay on his land. And for him, there were no repercussions. This was all told to us by the man who was leading our travel in a van that day, who himself had been 12 years old and who had joined up at that third campsite and marched to the fourth campsite. So he was 12, his parents went off to work, they expected him to be going off to school, and an uncle came by and said, "Do you boys and girls want to go on the march?" And they said, "Yes." So they went and joined the march, just thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming out by this time. The fourth day, it just seemed, as he said, he looked back, it just seemed to be unlimited marchers, so long that you couldn't see the end. People were singing and they were clapping. They stayed that night pretty near Montgomery in what was a Catholic hospital site. There had been entertainers who had arranged to come and help the marchers, and they call it the night the stars fell on Montgomery. Many entertainers who came. The 12-year-old boy, who's now in his 70s, who was talking to us, said that we asked him if he had loved all those performances. He said, "I didn't know them. I was just hanging out with my buddies." But meanwhile, that Catholic hospital complex that served Black people, after the order had allowed the marchers to stay there, all the white doctors left, and all the white hospitals would not give privileges to the Black doctors to work. So that entire hospital system closed down. It's being renovated now, but it was just completely shut down. On day 5, they walked through the last part of the Black neighborhood. They were now into Montgomery. And it was, as we saw what happened, because of this march, shortly thereafter, the federal interstates came in. Remember how we had them here in Boston too, and there was an effort to stop the interstate coming through our communities of color here in Boston. Well, they succeeded in Montgomery and destroyed the Black community by cutting through with these major throughways. So neighborhoods that had been thriving Black neighborhoods have all been chopped up. 18,000 families were displaced. And so exactly where the marchers went, you have to kind of follow your way carefully. But that was done in retaliation for the marches, show people how to stay in their place. But they all came through to the end, to the State House, which sits right there, just 2 or 3 blocks from where we stayed in Montgomery. And the idea was to present some petitions to Governor Wallace, and he instructed the state folks not to allow Dr. King to mount the steps. So they brought out a flatbed truck, and Dr. King stood on it at the bottom of the steps, and that's when he gave his famous speech about he could tell people were tired, he could tell they were worried, and he said, "I know you're wondering how long." And then he would say something, "Not long," tell them about God's promises. And how long will we wait? And he kept echoing back, "Not long, not long." We all know what happened for Dr. King after that. But the thing that was extraordinary was that people kept on keeping on. They nevertheless came, they nevertheless marched. And after that march, that's within a few days, President Johnson submitted the Voting Rights Act. That was then, took some time, but then passed. So the story of implications, people understanding the ramifications, physical brutality, as well as just loss of economic your economic life, your neighborhood and the like, but people continued. They continued in faith, they continued in commitment, and they continued. And it's out of respect for them that so many people like Brian Stevenson wants to have us today continue, especially today with all the people being excluded. So that was one of the final things we did. I know it's already 6:04. You know, I have a hard time being limited in what I say. My apologies. But I want to please invite any questions that you have, at least until about 6:15, if that's all right with you. And again, this was not our intention to share this today. We didn't have much time to prepare, but I hope you'll bear with us. And we look forward to hearing from Marshana when she can come into it. Questions?
Let me also note, Joy, that you would like to do this again, right? You'd like to take another group. And so we're going to be reflecting on that and considering who would like to come and how do we make that a good experience for another group.
I was supposed to leave enough time for June to also reflect on some of the colleagues, the other clergy and leaders we discovered in Montgomery. We may not have time, June, but you want to give a snippet? Sorry.
Sure, yeah, it's always important, as I was saying in my beginning, that that we understand and get a sense of little flavor of the community. So on Saturday, we had a deep dialogue with some people from the Church of the Good Shepherd, which is an African American congregation that sits in the middle of the west side of Montgomery, about a block from Dr. King's parsonage, the one that that was bombed during the bus boycott. And we had a good conversation. Larry and Amy, the pastor and his wife are white, but they're serving an African American multicultural congregation. So several of their members from their congregation came in, and I think we had a really good dialogue. And then I have another storyteller, Georgette Norman, who she was the first executive director of the Rosa Parks Museum, who's a poet and a writer, and she steered us up. And then we had another woman named Brenda Battle, who used to be the docent at Dexter Street Avenue Baptist Church, where Dr. King was the pastor there when the bus cart was going in. And she runs a similar kind of thing that I do, but she runs it from Montgomery. She's from Montgomery, but she was so much fun and serious, had us singing. Now, you got a choir here. Okay, it wasn't that good. But anyways, the spirit, we sung in the spirit, and it was really good. There's a song about be the change you want to be in the world, okay? You see the faces of the pilgrims light up. I'm not going to make them sing it, but I'm still singing that song, okay? And then the last, yesterday before we left, we went to a wonderful church called the Metropolitan United Methodist Church. And I chose this site because they have a young preacher there who's unfiltered. And he's smart. His name is Richard Williams, and he's a Morehouse graduate, MDiv, and undergrad there. And he came to this country club church right in the middle of the Black community. It had been pastored by a white minister. The white minister was there because he was married to an African American woman, and none of the other Methodist churches would take him. So he ends up in the Black community. So Reverend Williams comes into a situation that is really interesting. He went out in the community and he asked people at the gas stations, at the health centers, what do you know about my church and what do people say? And people said, well, that's a white church, number one. And then they also said, that's a country club church. If you go up there, you got to dress up. And so he said, oh my God, we got to turn this thing around, because he comes out of this deep faith and belief that we really do we're in this work, and we're doing a journey, a spirit, to be able to serve others and to reach out beyond ourselves. And so he established with his congregation something called the Beacon Center, which serves and provides fresh food and produce and some meat from what do they call that? Reaping from like Costco's and some of the bigger stores that have to let food go. They give out about 150 bags a day, serving a number of families. They have some testing for HIV. They have some employment work that's being done there. And so it's just like a wonderful model of how we can do church in the church as well as outside of the church, right? And so I'm always excited. Someone said every now and then God drops a handkerchief and we call it a saint. And he's a saint. I think he spends all of his working time at the church and in the community and has been challenging city officials around, well, with all this tourism that's coming into this city from Bryan Stevenson with, over 500 new units of hotel rooms being built, where and how can that money be funneled back into the economy there? So we know that the arc of the arc of justice is long, universe is long, and I think he's one of the people that's jumping up and pulling down that thing, that arc, so that some people can really get some needed services in Montgomery.
Related to that, oh, Faith, I'll be done in just 1 second. We created thoughts at the end, brought together things. Cheryl gave us a band she wears around her wrist that comes from her Unitarian church, which is the Arlington Street Unitarian Church. And that is a band that's given out at Arlington Street Church here in Boston that says, "The service begins when the service ends."
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The service begins when the service ends. Faith, go ahead.
Faith was in some of the pre-training that we did. It's good to see you, Faith.
Cheryl, can you ask Faith to unmute as our host?
Wish I could do it for you.
Yeah.
Can I? No.
But you can give her that ask to unmute and then it's a button in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Faith, we can't hear you.
Faith is suffering.
Yeah. I mean, she knows how to unmute,
Yeah.
but something's going wrong, obviously.
Faith, we're going to come back to you because we want to hear. So let's talk to someone else. You can do it. Anyone else? Questions? Thoughts? There's just a lot to absorb. Learning. We know that Faith is a person who will not be silenced. So we will gather together and do all that we can to make sure we can share with you what her comments were, because we all want to hear them. Faith, I'm sorry for the technological challenges. I don't think I'm a host today. Well, maybe we will end now since it's 6:13. We didn't really get many questions from you all because we talked so long. I'm sorry. Is there another question anyone had? So glad you were all here.
I just have one question for all of you who went. How do you pronounce Montgomery?
Do you know? I'd call it Montgomery without a T, but what do you think?
Without the T?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we learned when we were there. They don't, they don't pronounce the T. Montgomery.
Montgomery, yeah, yeah.
did.
Montgomery.
Oh, here's Faith.
Hey, you're here.
Oh.
Thank you. I just want to ask, is it in the between Sundays or some other letter or document to the congregation, can we have a list of who went? A list, just bare bones, a list of who went, a list of what you saw, and is it possible to put in the link to this meeting that we've had so that people who weren't there can do it? Is that possible?
Of course.
Okay, good. Now I'm happy.
Good. I say that because I won't be the one doing it. You know my technological skills.
I want to mention that our group did include 2 people who haven't been much involved with King's Chapel, and that was a good, I mean, first of all, they were great participants, but it was, I think, helpful for us to be reminded that it wasn't all about King's Chapel.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Much love to you all. Oh, Stephen, yes.
Well, Betsy's comment made me think, and maybe on this next trip that you're talking about, we could broaden it out ethnically as well, so that we could build some relationships there. Because I'm going to be on it this time, Bart, if I can possibly make it.
Yeah, I want June just to comment on the trip that you took when I went in a group and how you had 2 separate groups that went.
Oh, yeah, I did. Last October, Joy was in the multicultural group, but I also realized people of color have been asking me for a space where they could just do this work as a group of people. I say people who are wrapped in brown and black skin. And so that was a different experience in terms of how we processed. Look, that group wanted to look at the legacy of trauma in their families around how people, this is very painful for some people, and just to get there and then to open those wounds and then to do some healing. So our work focused a lot on healing. And it was very good. And so I'm at the point now where I'm putting out dates for next year and for 2026. 2026 for I'll do the fall, and then for next March of 2026. But every group is different, and I love working with whoever shows up. Whoever shows up, or when you show up, that's who needs to be there, right? And so we'll work deeply, and at the same time, we'll find a little joy in ourselves in doing this work and being community together. And I think that's the powerful piece. I just wish I had been on that van ride last night.
I've been giving thanks I wasn't.
Well, I miss my people. I'm bonded now. I'm bonded.
Well, there is apparently, I can't believe this is true, but I fell asleep on Gianna's shoulder and she started giggling, and I was like, I snorted and woke up and everything. So that was one moment that I didn't plan to share with you, but now I have.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still unmuted. There is a Netflix film called Lee Daniels Butler, which is told through a volunteer who was with all the sit-ins and stuff like that, and his father, who was a butler at the White House.
Oh,
okay. Absolutely. All right. I'm sorry. I know it's 6:15. I should let you all go. Many blessings and thank you so much. So next Monday is going to be on Sunday. We hear from Dr. Nicole Trent, who is the new president and CEO of the Museum of African American
Nice
history.
History. Thank you.
Nice.
Right out here on Joy Street in the Beacon Hill. She's great. And just as a footnote, she's going to preach. Her father is a very powerful Black preacher minister in Washington, D.C. So she comes from the roots. And then on Monday, as I say, we'll hear from the family. who was, the roots go way, way back to have been enslaved by some of the people who were in our church. And they are very thoughtful people. And then the week after that, on Monday, we'll be hearing from our beloved Roshana Moore Evans, who's really been helping us a lot, who ran before she came here, ran the Harvard slavery program. So she has a lot to learn. All right. A lot to teach us, rather. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take
all.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Hey, Cheryl, can I talk to you?
Yes.
Enjoy.
Okay.
Bye.
We're in
Bye.
Betsy. I just want to
Nice to see you again, Betsy.
You guys okay?
Yeah, we're fine.
Oh, good. Good.
It was
That
actually a lot of fun, to be honest with you. But I'll sleep well tonight.
I know you haven't got a rest at all.
No. And I told
your eyes are like little slits, both of you.
well, Bob has gotten, Bob's a big Passim's folk music person. And we happen to have tickets to a performer tonight. So that's my next stop.
Stop. Get out of here.
I'm drinking coffee. So
Well, what time is service on Sunday? I might come.
it's at 11.
Oh, 11. Okay. I don't know if you're one of those early, like 10 o'clock.
Well, we have a 9 o'clock service, June, that meets in our parish house in our little.
Okay.
And at what we've been doing at that service is showing the sermon from the week before. So, for example, this week they will see the sermon that was just preached by
Okay.
Jared.
All right.
And
Okay. Very good.
all of those recorded. But no, Dr. Trent will be with us on Sunday, and we would love to have him.
I look forward to hearing her.
Good. Yeah. She's
yes. Okay.
And we hope we can do work together with her, her history program.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've got a myriad of ideas, so we'll be in touch.
That you do. Everyone who's still on the call, did you notice she said ideas? This is a local girl, okay? She grew up in Providence. Anyway.
I'm the community.
Yeah.
I'm the community you're looking for, okay? Cheryl, I need to talk to you about the More Up invoice.
Oh.
You get a minute.
Did they not
do that offline?
They didn't. Okay, they didn't receive payment?
No, they said they did. I got an email on my way home.
Okay. I will look that up.
But they're really kind of they have a lot on their plate. They have a lot.
I'm sorry for the trouble. Yeah. I will
No. That's okay. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good week.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Toodles.
Bye-bye.